Hello one, hello all, and welcome to the Laughter Salad. Yay! So glad to have you here. Today I'm going to talk about something that's very important to me, which is meditating, and something else that's very important to me, which is having ADHD. Not the easiest thing in the world, but yeah. So I love meditating. I think meditating is really cool. But having ADHD does make meditating harder. But that doesn't mean that there's not little tricks you can try to make it more bearable on yourself. So let's get straight into it. Here are 5 tips for meditating if you have ADHD, like yours truly. First one, and this is the first one because it's the most important one. It's like really, really fucking key. And it is straighten out your motivation. Like, why are you doing this at all? Like, why do you want to meditate? You know what I mean? Are you doing it just because everyone says that it's good for you? Are you doing it because your dad says you had to? Are you doing it because your therapist says you have to? Because if it's any of those, just give up right now. Like, you don't need to do it. You don't need to do something just because everyone says it's the great thing to do. And just because it works for them doesn't mean it works for you. So if you're gonna meditate, especially if you have ADHD, do it because you want to do it. Like, I have personally felt in my life the benefits of a consistent meditation practice. And it's like, okay, how can I have felt it if I can't do it in the first place? But so you don't have to have like this experience where you have felt how good it is for you, so you want to keep doing it. But you have to, at the very least, believe that it will help you. Like, you are doing it because you believe in it, because you want to, because you think it will be good for you, not because other people think it will be good for you. Part of ADHD is that external motivators don't work as well for us as they work for other people. Like the dopamine, the dopamine just like isn't as responsive to these like external things. So having these external motivators of other people in your life just like is just never gonna work out for you. Intrinsic motivation is always more powerful than extrinsic motivation. This is why I'm saying like you have to want it. It has to come from within. And you know, sometimes even when you do really want it, you still can't do it. And that's where the next 4 tips come in. But the first thing is really make sure you're doing it because you want to do it. All right, tip number 2. Don't use your phone for a timer. Don't do it. It doesn't work. It's not this thing right here. This is where distraction central lives. This is where all my like ADHD soothing mechanisms like scrolling and what the fuck ever. That's where all of this lives. I have this clock right by where I meditate. And then when I start, I just look at it. I calculate how many minutes, like 15 minutes away is, or however minutes you're trying to do. And then I just basically keep an eye on it. And when it's done, I'm free. You know what I mean? And you might feel like, oh, but then you have to like keep opening your eyes to check. Like, no, you don't. You can just keep your eyes closed and then just open your eyes whenever. And if you did a little more meditation, it's not a problem. But it's not gonna be a little more. Let me just tell you that right now. It's gonna be like, you're there. Like, okay, I probably did it like 20 minutes already. You open eyes, 3 minutes tops. That's okay. That's part of the process. It's not a big deal. And like, even with the timer, I find myself going to check the timer anyway. So it's okay if you're like opening your eyes to check on the clock. Just use a clock. Or if you want to use one of those like kitchen timers, you can, but I don't like those as much as well. Like, the other problem with using a phone is that the chime at the end is so jarring, you know? You just spent all this time trying to like cultivate like mental clarity and peace and serenity, and then the alarm goes and you know, a kitchen timer has the same issue. So I think it's best to just do the math, and when it hits the time until you're able to leave, then you can go. And I think it makes you feel more in control of it as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but which I also think is important. I also wouldn't recommend using stuff like Insight Timer, you know, like those meditation apps where you can like, I'm meditating, and then your friend sees that you're also meditating. Great if you don't have ADHD. If you have ADHD, wouldn't recommend it. Like, it just distracting. I wouldn't recommend it. Okay. Tip number 3. Try different methods of meditation, okay? Meditation has been wildly practiced in across the fucking globe, you know what I mean? So there are many, 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 many different ways to meditate, and you can keep experimenting until you find whichever one is the easiest for you. Like, there's no shame in going for the easiest. Like, start where it works. Start where it's easiest, you know, especially if you don't have a meditation habit set up, just start where it's easiest. And I feel like the one where people are just like, okay, just focus on having no thoughts. If thoughts pass you by, don't hold on to them. Let them go by you. And like, there are cars passing by on the road. That was terrible for me because my ADHD mind's like, well, I don't want to have no thoughts. So if we have to think about them as cars passing by in the road, then I'm gonna get like really distracted by the scenario, and I'll be like, okay, are they passing by on a dirt road and I'm sitting on the porch and I'm on a rocking chair? And like, I'm sorry, that's all thinking. That's all a little story you're telling yourself in your head, and what you want to avoid is exactly that very storytelling. So I think that one for me is one of the meditation techniques that's like hardest for me to practice. Just have no attachment to, like, it's really advanced. It's a really advanced meditation technique, and I don't understand why it's touted as a beginner's technique. Like, it's not for beginners at all. Another one that I find slightly better is focusing on your breath, because then you do have something to direct your energy towards, right? It's not just running away from thoughts, but like directing towards something. So you just focus on your inhale. And I think breath is a little bit better than the last one. Like I said, I think the only problem with breath focus is that it is a part of you. It's like inside of you. So like when you get distracted, I feel like it's harder coming back to it, because like, okay, imagine I'm doing my breaths, I'm breathing really slow, and then I get distracted. It's normal in meditation to get distracted. Like, it's normal and it's okay. Like, we're trying to minimize distractions, but you're gonna get distracted anyway. So then you get distracted, and then the pace of your breath changes, and then you focus back in on your breath, and you're like, oh no, now I'm breathing too fast. Like, oh, now I can't meditate anymore because like, it's not going well anymore, you know? Like, it can kind of snowball into going wrong because it's inside of you. You know what I mean? So those are 2 types that like maybe work for some people, but I don't think are necessarily that great. Let me give you 2 types that I really like and I think are great for if you have ADHD. One of them is the Abraham Hicks's method of meditation, where you just have air conditioning on and you close your eyes and you listen to the electrical sound of air conditioning. And that's it. You get distracted, you go back to the air conditioning. I don't know. Yeah, that's basically it. That's the only rule. You get distracted, you go back to the sound of the air conditioning. And because it's all outside of you, it stays really constant. So if you have one of those air conditionings that like turns on and off depending on like the temperature, then this doesn't work as well. And you could also use a fan, because a fan just stays on. But like my air conditioning, there's a way to set it where it just like stays on constantly. So that works for me. But if your condition doesn't have that, maybe consider using a fan, or you can use one of those like white noise makers. But then if you do it with an app, you get back to the whole touching your phone right before meditating thing, which again, I don't think your phone should be involved in your meditation at all. It's just a recipe for disaster. It doesn't work out well. So I really recommend a fan. You know, a fan's something easy. Most of us have fans. And you can just turn it on and leave it on, and then you just focus on the sound of the fan. I really like that one. I like it that you can do it with your eyes closed. I like that the thing that you're focusing on is outside of yourself, so it's a little bit easier to not become so attached to it. It's a little bit easier to have that detachment. And yeah, I think it's really easy and simple, and it really works for me. So I really recommend this one. Another one I really recommend for ADHD in particular, and this is like particularly like if you're very like agitated at the time when you're trying to meditate. And that's candlelight meditation, where you just light a candle and then you just stare at the flame. And your meditation is just staring at the flame for however much time you're sitting down to meditate. And I think this can be really good because like a flame's a little bit more dynamic, you know? So it's a little bit easier for it to hold your focus than something like the air conditioning sound. You know, the flame's always moving. It feeds that little pyromaniac in all of us that loves fire. You know, if you don't love fire, I guess, I don't know, I guess that doesn't apply to you, but come on, what's wrong with you? It's recommended in Ayurveda. It's just like a way to like, as it being good for your eyes, because I'm not gonna try to say because, I don't know why. Obviously, be fire safe if you're going to be doing this. Don't do it if you're a child, and don't do it if you don't feel confident that you could quickly and safely put out any fire caused by that flame. If you don't feel confident you could do that, then don't. This one's not for you. I would not recommend doing a video of a camp flame. It just doesn't have the same, it's like, it's not the same at all. So if you can't be safe, then you're just gonna have to pick a different one. And yeah, the world is your oyster here. I'm sure there's like tons more of different meditation techniques out there. I could do a whole video just on this different meditation techniques. So let's stop it here. But yeah. Number 4. Celebrate little victories and also lower your bar for success. You know what I mean? So you never meditated before, meditated for 5 minutes. Bro, that's fucking huge. I honestly think 5 minutes a day is already enough to like make a huge difference in your life. And let's say, and like I usually do 15 minutes, right? Because I think that's the sweet spot for me, and it might be different for different people. And let's say I'm there and I sit there for the 15 minutes, but the whole 15 minutes, my mind is wandering, I'm talking to myself, I'm not meditating at all, I'm not doing it properly at all, I'm just like sitting there and thinking. That's still a success. That's still a victory, because I sat on the mat and I tried. For 15 minutes, I sat there and I tried. And maybe it like feels like, it feels like I didn't even try because I did it so bad. But like, that's just lies your brain tells you. It's just straight up a lie. So yeah, it doesn't have to be like fucking Nirvikalpa Samadhi for it to qualify as a success. Okay, it's a success. You sat there, you did it. It's a success. You wanted to sit for 15 minutes, but you did 7, and then you just couldn't stand it anymore, and then you had to leave. That's a success. 7 minutes. 7 minutes more than you did. Yes. Celebrate yourself. Praise yourself at the end. Like, wow, I just did such a good job because I tried to do it. Just like, no matter how it went, it's a victory. It's a success because you tried, and you should celebrate that. Celebrate trying. You know what I mean? And this brings me to my last point, which is also a really important one, which is, if it sucks, hit the bricks. You know what I mean? This one, I feel like, is my most controversial tip. But like, okay, if you said you were going to meditate for 15 minutes and 7 minutes in, you hate it, you feel like you're crawling out of your skin, you feel like you're only sitting there because someone has a gun to your head and is making you sit there and meditate, leave. Even if that person is you yourself holding the gun to your head, you can just leave. If it sucks, hit the bricks, you know? And I say that this is controversial because, of course, like, especially as you get started, meditation isn't like easy and fun and great for anyone immediately. Like, it's basically antithetical to the purpose of your mind, which is to think. So it's gonna be hard for everyone. So it does require a certain amount of just like discipline and like sticking it out. But there's a difference between like, oh, this is kind of boring, but you know, I know it's good for me, so I can push through, versus feeling like you're under attack, then you just have to be there, or feeling like you're trapped, like you're trapped prey. As long as you're still choosing it, then that's good. But if you feel like you're trapped there, leave. Just leave. You don't have to finish it out. You wanted to do 15, you only did 5, great. leave. Stop it now. Because you're just creating this association in your brain of meditation as something that traps you, as something that takes away your freedom. And then if you force yourself through that feeling enough times, eventually you're just not going to want to meditate anymore because it just feels terrible and it feels like shit, you know? So if you do it for 7 minutes and it feels kind of bad, not great, but you know, you were able to stick it out and then you left, you're more likely to come back to the mat the next day than if you did the full 15 minutes that day, but the last 7 minutes of those 15 minutes felt like hell on earth. And again, trying to just like force your way through it only works if you're neurotypical. And honestly, sometimes I think not even then. Sometimes I think not even the neurotypicals should be forcing themselves through this. But if you have ADHD, you especially shouldn't. You especially shouldn't. It's not gonna work. You're not gonna remember or feel good about the victory of sticking out for 15 minutes. You're only gonna remember how miserable those last 7 minutes felt. And like, this is how you build resilience, right? So you do want to have some resilience to the feeling of boredom, to the feeling of like being there and it sucks, you know what I mean? But the way to build resilience in a way that is sustainable is to do it a little bit at a time. If you try to do too much at once, you're just gonna set yourself back. And slowly, you know, you're gonna start being like, okay, maybe I can do 9 minutes, maybe I can do 11 minutes. There is no rush for you being able to get to like 15 minutes of meditation a day. I'm just using that as the example goal because it's my example goal. But like, I know people who meditate 2+ hours a day, and I know people who meditate 8+ hours a day. I know, they're insane, they're crazy. But I respect all the crazies of this world. Even the ones that meditate 8 hours a day. You know, so your goal might be something much higher than 15 minutes. But whatever your goal is, there's no rush to getting there. Like meditation, like out of all the tasks in the world, it's the one that's most like, it's not a race. You should do it in your own time. You don't need to rush. You know what I mean? Just do a little bit and then celebrate that victory of doing a little bit, you know? And if you can't do more than a little bit, that's okay. Leave. That's all right. Because at the end of the day, you are doing this for you to make yourself feel better, right? So if it's just making you feel bad and miserable and terrible, then it's not worth it. And again, boredom, I mean, it's hard to prove this, but I think boredom feels much worse to people who have ADHD than people who don't. So people who just give the advice of like, oh, just stick it out, don't understand how unbearable it is. If it's unbearable, you don't have to bear it. And it doesn't mean you failed. It's still a win because you sat there for how many minutes you sat there. So just to recap, tip number 1, straighten out your motivation. Do it for yourself, not others. Number 2, try not to have a phone involved in any step of the process. No alarms, no apps, nothing. Number 3, try different meditation methods until you find out the one that works for you. Number 4, lower your bar for success and celebrate little victories, even if you only meditated a little bit, even if you sat there and didn't really meditate, but you sat there and you tried to do it, and that's a victory. And number 5, if it sucks, hit the bricks. You don't have to put up with that shit. All right, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Like and subscribe. Bye-bye.